Hey everybody, what is up? Inksmith back again, and surprise, surprise, Weiss has taken down his old videos and now put up another new channel with new videos. He did this because he felt like the old videos did not play him in the best light, and I guess he would be right about that. I think we could all agree. I think also the last video that he posted on his Just Kai channel was a bit unhinged, like I think we all saw. And I guess he finally had enough awareness. I think this is the first time I've ever seen this guy have any kind of awareness to realize how bad those videos made him look. That he was like laughing and giggling through things about arguing over tiny gifts and stuff like that. So you're probably wondering now, with this new channel coming out, has Kai changed? Has he finally made that big turnaround where he admits all his faults and sees the light? No, of course not. He wouldn't make another channel if that was the case, because if he had a smart lawyer or someone defending him or any sort of knowledge of how the court system works, he wouldn't put anything out there on the web at all. He would wait till all of this was done, let the court solve it, let them prove everything he's saying is right, and then come back and say, well, I was absolved in court, so how could I possibly be guilty? But he doesn't have the time, the patience, or self-awareness to do that, and instead decides to go into another long rant about, God, all the same stuff, all the same things, slightly changing the story. And these slight changes, I think he really thinks these paint him in a better light now. But if anything, they do just the opposite, because they show how his stories don't match up from the past to his new ones, how he had to take down all his old ones. And, isn't it lovely that we know him for being a DMCA madman who will strike down anything anybody takes? So not a lot of it is saved from his old videos because everybody's worried about getting a DMCA strike on their channel. And even with his new videos that he put up, I know I may be looking into this too deep, but he used a lot of anime and Ghibli stuff, where if someone tried to copy and use clips from his channel, they would be copyright striked by Ghibli. So it would be very difficult to use his new content, and he doesn't put his face in the new ones, and I'm pretty sure that's why he would do that, is so that it is hard. Luckily, in the past and even now, I've never borrowed any of his video because, once again, I don't want a DMCA strike. I'll talk about this, I'll watch the videos for you so you don't have to, and then talk about them now. So, first of all, he comes out and says, he begins the video by talking about that, like, I think I did a poor job with the old videos, and I think I'm going to do better with this ones. And, I was really innocent of everything and not guilty at all. Oh, and I was only arrested for 5 different crimes during this time. And it starts out with strangulation and grand larceny are the things he was arrested for. And this is completely according to his own video. I'm not just making these accounts up. Now he's changed because I think he realized just how bad it looked that he slapped Hana 3 times. Or Omnia, sorry. He calls them Hana all the time, but I always think of Omnia. Neither one is their right name. It's not their real name. It's obviously an online alias, which totally makes sense. I use the same thing. Everybody does, I think, at this point. So he slapped them 3 times, but now it's changed because he was slapping them because they were attacking him. And then also because they asked them to hit them and kill them. And also, after he did that, he quickly closed the bathroom door in the area where he had slapped them and now stands outside waiting until they are okay to come back out. And it's like, okay, so this really isn't making sense, because before, I remember the story happened in their bedroom, that they were at the edge of the bed or on a beanbag and they started to get into some sort of slap fight, and then it changed to being in the bathroom, and then it changed to he couldn't run away, and then it changed to, oh, well, I slapped them, but it was because they told me to slap them. Oh, but no, I slapped them to protect myself. Oh, no, wait, I slapped them to protect myself, and then I closed the door so that there wouldn't be any more confrontation whatever happened to just leaving? And of course, Kai's got another excuse for that, why he doesn't just leave the apartment when these kind of fights go down, because he doesn't want Omnia to hurt themselves. He's worried they are going to cut themselves, and he uses an old picture of an old scar on their hand from a long time ago and says this happened a long time ago where they scarred themselves by cutting the base of their hand. And it's like, yeah, like maybe that did happen. Maybe they did do that. But first of all, if that's really your worry, number one, you don't want to injure them. You don't want to fight with them physically. You leave and you call their friend to come over to watch them. Okay, you can still stay on the outside of the apartment door and wait for that friend to show up before you completely leave the area, if that's really your big worry. But if it puts distance between you and the person that you say is quote unquote attacking you, and it also stops you from hitting them, then why not just do that? I don't, like, it still does not make any sense to me how he could justify any sort of hitting, like slapping them 3 times. And not only that, it's mentioned that he held them down and slapped them 3 times, that he supposedly had to restrain them and slap them 3 times. Isn't restraining enough? Like, he says even the marks on their arms was because he held them down, and those are probably pressure marks from him holding them down. So you already were holding them down. There's marks on 2 arms. Was were they slapping you with their feet? Like what? What? Like it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't. No matter how many times Kai tries to rearrange the story or tell it in a different light or explain it again, it just doesn't add up. And I think that's one thing he doesn't seem to understand, is that as the story keeps changing, this is something we always see from people who try to make excuse for bad things that they've done. They keep changing the story. If someone really hasn't done something bad, if they haven't done any sort of crime, they haven't done any sort of abuse, their story is a story that absolves them of said abuse from the start, and then they never have to change that story because it's already absolved them from the first telling. Can we not all agree on that? That there's a big reason why he has to keep changing what he did to them? Oh, and then the next part he goes into, very interesting here. He says that he used to be such like a great creator, that he used to have a lot of creativity and be such a nice dude. But from the time that he was with Omnia, that's when the worst part of him came out. That it was night and day, according to him. This is quoting verbatim. He says, "I was night and day after being with them for so long. It brought out the worst in me." So, I mean, someone doesn't bring out the quote unquote worst in you by themselves. If there's a worst in you, you have a responsibility of bringing that out as well. And if you really feel like that is the situation where someone is bringing out the worst in you, then leave the worst part, okay? Like leave whatever's creating that worst part. Why stay with them and continue this constant cycle? Now, I know I've done the same thing before. I've stayed with a person who made me feel and act very crazy before. And it took me leaving that person to realize that we were both negatively feeding each other. But at no point did I let that negative or bad part of me become an excuse made by only using them as the excuse, by them being 100% the reason for me doing stupid stuff like spending too much money, or I know not checking whether or not someone was lying to me or not. It's my mistakes are my mistakes from the past, and the same thing goes for Kai. Okay, he can say, yeah, maybe their relationship was chaotic. As Emily Artful said, she feels sorry for both people because she was quite sure the relationship was chaotic. And he took a huge offense to that, saying like, I never did anything chaotic or crazy. But now he did do something chaotic and crazy, and the story's changed again, and he was only a bad person because Omnia brought out that bad person. Interesting. So I guess when it fits the situation to excuse bad behavior, then you were a bad person. But even when you were a bad person, it was because Omnia made you a bad person. Interesting. Very precise way of excusing every single thing you've done in the past. Unbelievable. Then, of course, we've got 5 arrests and we've got abuse allegations, and he spends maybe about 5 minutes talking about this, and then like the next 34 minutes or so of the video, it's back to quarreling over items again. Tiny little items and gifts, and arguing about wish lists, and this was mine, this was theirs, this was mine. And I think you should, if you're really worried about people's view of you right now, I think you should try to explain the arrests and the abuse allegations a lot more than you waste time on these stupid, petty items. Items of technology that in 2 years will be obsolete and no one will want them and no one will care. Yet she will still be suffering the damage from the trauma you caused. Later, no one's going to care about, like, oh, she had they had a MacBook from 2018. How dare they? Like, come on. Like, really? Okay. And he also says that everything they gave to each other as gifts, they agreed to take back when they left each other's house. But Omnia, they kept all of Kai's gifts. And so he felt justified in taking his own gifts back. But let's really think about that situation. They did not need to take any of your gifts. If your gifts are at the house and you leave them there, they are not stealing your gifts from you. You have left them there, right? You, on the other hand, are physically picking up, taking, and removing the gifts. Hence, you have these arrests on your case right now, because larceny means stealing. Also, I noticed this time around too, he completely left out the part where he left the door open for things to be conveniently stolen by mysterious people who, I don't know if Omnia lost their stuff, or I left the door open, so if something got stolen, it wasn't me. But now Kai's conveniently left that part of the story out. Luckily, I remember that and I can go back and listen to it, but that video is completely taken down. Wow, big surprise there, huh? On top of it, Kai says, I only took 3 things, and the only reason I took them was because I needed to transport stuff to my place. And those 3 things were a school bag, a cat carrier, and a laundry basket. Afterwards, I was going to return them once the protection order was done. Okay, all right. But see, here's the thing is, in the last video, you talked about taking a woman's Adidas shoes. You talked about all these other gifts that you took too. And so now the story's not making sense anymore, because did you or did you not take those other things? And what part did you consider gifts and what part were considered your things? Were those women's Adidas yours? The ones that probably wouldn't fit your feet because both of you are very different heights? I noticed he left those out right away. Why is it changing again? And also, I don't remember hearing about school bag, cat carrier, and laundry basket and the old one. If those were really the only things you took, why didn't you mention that to begin with in the first set of videos that you made? See, this is the problem we have. The stories just keep changing and they don't match up. Now, after that, that's where he begins to mention that they had an agreement about returning gifts. So why wouldn't you mention that one before, too? Also, if you really have an agreement on gifts that were upwards of $3,000 to $2,000, like he talks about with like monitors and Nintendo Switches, which are $300, monitors can be up to $300, $600. MacBooks, which can be, those are pretty expensive. You're talking about $2,000 to $3,000. If you really have an agreement of this much money, something that could lead to grand larceny, which actually is a price point that brings the allegations up to that point. You actually have to have a certain amount stolen for it to be called larceny. Why wouldn't you sign a contract? You're not married. You don't need a prenup. But if these were really things that you had agreed on, there needed to be a contract. And if there wasn't, there was only a verbal agreement. A verbal agreement is not enough. Okay, so all this is a moot point. Maybe she did keep some of your stuff. Like one thing he talks about is this monitor that Omnia's dad gave them, a monitor that Omnia then gave him, Kai, and that she kept the monitor. What? What was she? Were they supposed to pick up and move the monitor to your new place after putting a protection order on you? Like, is it Omnia's fault that you didn't pick up the monitor and take it? Are you saying you just left the monitor? Because if you did, then how is Omnia stealing the monitor if you've left it at their house? That doesn't really make any sense. That sounds like you couldn't afford to, or you couldn't pack up, or you couldn't properly protect and carry the monitor. So you left one of those items. And I remember him even saying that when he went back and watched the video, he saw the monitor in the background and said, "Oh, that one was mine. That was my monitor. She stole that." And it's like, no, they didn't steal that. They had that at their house. They didn't move it for you because that's not their job. You left it there. It's considered a loss. Like, you can't leave things at people's house. If someone comes over and spends the night at your house and forgets a bag of clothes there, you have not then stolen the clothes or the bag. Like that kind of logic does not work. And I don't know if he is pretending he doesn't understand that or really doesn't understand that. It's confusing. Then he mentions that Omnia had way more money than him. He goes off that they had so much more money than him, something like $23,000 more from their creep show art videos. Well, great. So what? But then later goes into describing that they spent way too much money too, that they bought themselves a couch and they bought themselves a MacBook, and that he had to sit down with them and explain to them that they were spending too fast. So which one was it? Did they have too much money or did they not have too much money? Because you can't tell us both stories. That he's saying they should have paid for more. They had so much more money, but also he had to sit them down and talk to them about how they didn't have much money and were spending too much. So which one is it? Is it they had too much or they had too little from spending too much? Then he goes off on this long list about toys, hoodies, earrings. This guy gets so petty that he gets into Lysol wipes that Omnia kept. He gets really pissed off that she asked for Lysol wipes on her wish list. And he's like, "Well, I just hope you know they've kept an entire 4-pack of Lysol wipes, and if you paid for those Lysol wipes on their wish list, then now she has 5 packs of Lysol wipes." Oh my God, 5 packs of Lysol wipes? Oh my God. Somebody call Fort Knox. What? Somebody call the FBI. We've got too many Lysol wipes at Omnia's place. Are you really that petty? Like that pisses you off enough that you need to mention that? Guys, let me ask you guys a question here about gifts and splitting up with people in the past. Have you ever taken any of your gifts back? Because I don't know about you, but anybody I've gifted anything to in a relationship in the past, no matter how angry I was or how betrayed I was, and I've had girlfriends in the past like cheat on me, and even like I give them money and they spend it on stuff for another boyfriend. I've had a girl do that in the past, and I still let them keep all the gifts when we split up. It was, a contentious split up, but there was never a part where I thought like, "Oh, and I'm going to take back all the gifts I gave them." And even the girl, even if she totally hated me, like they let me keep all my gifts. Like, that's pretty normal still, right? Like that hasn't changed over time. Like, am I being like too old school to think like both people leave each other the gifts they bought for each other? Like, is that? Please answer that in the comments below. Like, I've never heard of people being so concerned with taking back the gifts they gave somebody, because if you take back the gifts you gave somebody, then they're not gifts, they're borrowed items, are they not? Like, am I getting it wrong here? Semantically, am I not correct in this way? Okay, so, what else do we got here? Oh, this is a great one too. The whole isolation and breaking apart Omnia from their family. So, Kai says, "I don't know what anybody's talking about that I made Omnia's parents break away from her and disconnect by telling them about her bi relationship. If you guys didn't know, their dad still paid for the Netflix account. So obviously, he hadn't completely abandoned them at all. They were still paying for things. A Netflix account? Really? That makes you think there's like a seriously still strong bond between them? Later, Kai goes into this whole thing about like also their parents visited the house all the time and would say hi and yeah, okay, like maybe they did. Maybe they, still checked in on, their their child. Of course, they would still check in on their child and make sure they are safe, but that doesn't mean they're going to start to financially support them again. Like that doesn't add up. And also Netflix, their father kept paying for Netflix, so he didn't cut off the financial support between them. He doesn't know what anybody's talking about. If their father still paid for Netflix, how could that be true? You know how easy it is to forget a side cost of Netflix, like have it on your credit card and forget that's one of the small charges. We're not talking like the father was paying for millions of dollars in rent every month and forgot about it. We're talking about like a $9 to $15 charge depending on where you live for Netflix. It's very easy to overlook that. And then he goes off on how, and I paid for Hulu and Disney and I paid for all these other it's like, are we really going to get this petty talking about what you paid for? He then explains that Omnia didn't always have enough for rent, but he had to cover a lot of the utilities so that they could afford to pay for rent. And then he literally shows these bills on the screen, and I thought like, oh well, maybe he's talking big money here. I don't know. It's like a $100 utility bill, an $80 and a $94 utility bill. So a little over about 280 if I round it up for him. Like that's me rounding it up for him. $280. Man, I wish my electric bill was only $280. Are you kidding me? Sometimes I pay $600 a month in Japan for my electric bill. Like I really wish it was only, $280. So you're talking about the comparison of a $280 utility payment and then complaining that Omnia didn't always have enough money to pay for the rent in New York City. We're not talking about a cheap part of the world where rent is like little to nothing. We're talking about New York City. And I notice he never at any point mentions how much rent was. He just complains that sometimes Omnia didn't have enough saved to be able to pay for utilities and rent, so he had to cover the utilities while they covered the rent. Oh, how nice of you. You covered some of the smaller costs while they covered the major costs. How nice. What an altruistic person you are. Change your name from Prince Kai to Angel Kai because truly you are an angel. Like does he not hear how this sounds? Does he think like maybe he's talking to people who don't understand the cost of rent? Or that maybe he thinks people will think rent and utilities are comparable as far as price is concerned? Like, this is not fooling anybody who's had to pay for their own utilities and rent before. Maybe small high school kids who haven't lived on their own yet and don't understand the cost of living. That's the only people I can imagine being fooled by this. Okay, let's see. Oh, then he says they had to change their name because I whined too much about their wish list. Yeah, they had to change the name of their wish list. Omnia did have to change the name of their wish list on Amazon because Kai whined too much. Is it okay if Omnia asks for some stuff after going through this traumatic experience? You know what? Maybe some of the stuff wasn't the same stuff. Like he talks about a couple things where it's like, it was not this version, it was this version. It wasn't version 4, it was version 5. And also, they didn't have this version. It's like, oh, okay, you know what? Maybe you are 100% right. Kai, I will give you that. Omnia asked for upgrades in certain equipment. I'll 100% give you that. Is it okay if people buy that for her? I mean, for them, like you know, whose problem is that? Is that your problem? Like, are you don't you understand like how you being angry about that is really weird? She's not holding a gun to people's heads and saying, "Pay for this stuff. Kai was mean to me. Pay for this stuff. I'm gonna, you're not gonna be my friend anymore if you do." Like, that's their choice. If they want to help a person out who just went through a traumatic experience, it makes them feel good and it makes the other person feel good for helping a person who just went through trauma and is in need. Can they have that? Can Omnia have that? Is that okay? Or does that really make you that upset? That a person who just went through a very rough breakup, a traumatic experience, abuse, and someone who needed to be arrested 5 times asks for a couple things on Amazon. How dare they? Is it like really? Like this is one of the things. It obviously bothered you enough that they had to change their name. They had to change the name of the list so that you would stop whining about it. And then you use this as like something against them that, oh, I can't believe they had to change their name just because I complained about their wish list. Yeah, that's weird, man. That's leave it alone, dude. If you're not really that upset, if you're not that vengeful, if you're not that spiteful, leave it alone. Let them enjoy a little bit of like downtime and maybe even a couple of gifts that replace some of the stuff they lost and maybe even upgrade some of the stuff they lost. God forbid. Okay. Okay, and then Kai talks about Omnia took a picture and showed everything that they left for the police to deliver to me. And Kai goes into this picture, and it's like a ton of stuff in this picture. It's kind of ridiculous. I'm surprised Omnia even went to the trouble of putting all of Kai's stuff together for him. He should be thankful that she even did this. Like, I've never had somebody I broke up with in the past put all my stuff together and be like, here it is in a nice, neat pile for you to take away. First of all, Omnia left it inside of her place, and she didn't need to do that. She could have probably left it out in the hallway, or maybe even left the door unlocked so some scrupulous people could take it away, like you did, Kai. But they were nice enough to leave it there for Kai to take, and it's a lot of stuff. And he goes into the trouble of like pointing out everything in his like, this one doesn't have my gift on it, and this place doesn't have my gift on it, and none of it says like, oh well, this stuff was stuff I already owned, and I'm really happy they gave it back to me. It's all about what they didn't get back, and Omnia has a picture of all the stuff. Kai does not. So all the things Kai wants to say that Omnia took from him, he doesn't have a picture of. So the person he's saying is the big thief is the one who literally took a picture and showed factual evidence of everything they returned, but he has none of it. Oh, wait, but he's got receipts. He's got receipts for all the stuff that he bought that are screenshots. Screenshot receipts. Guys, I could go look up a receipt for anything. There's not his name on it. There's not anything on there about like who purchased it, anything like that. I mean, I get it. You don't want to show your real name, but dude, if you could show us the paper receipt and like black out your name with a marker, that would make more sense. But instead, it's just screenshots. I could search for any kind of screenshot. I'm not saying he's lying about those receipts, but it's like when your best proof of your side of the story is screenshots anybody could Google to be like, yeah, I purchased these. These were things that I got myself. Here's the price and here's the product name. Like, come on, really? Like that's your big reveal to us that you own all this other stuff that Omnia supposedly stole from you, even though your idea of stealing is you left it at the apartment and Omnia didn't hand deliver it, I guess? So, come on, really? All right, going on. Yeah, he goes into a big spiel about Omnia took back all the stuff that they gifted to him. And it's like, no, you left your stuff. Like, that's what I wrote here in big letters. It's like, no, you left your stuff. Like, Kai leaving his stuff at Omnia's apartment doesn't mean she physically stole anything. They just didn't move it. That's all. All right, next one. Oh, God, we get into these texts and call logs. So Kai gets into about, I don't know why people say I isolated her. I don't know why people said I took down her channel. I have all this proof that I didn't do it. And he gets into a whole thing about I didn't have access to Omnia's email. I couldn't have entered in her password to delete her YouTube channel. But here's the thing. I've been doing YouTube since 2006, and I've been doing it on iPad, MacBook, iPhone, iWatch, whatever I could use at the time. And almost all of them are Apple products, and that's what they use. So I have a lot of familiarity with how it works between these types of hardware and the software that Google uses to let you sign in. You can have multiple accounts across multiple different pieces of hardware that add predictive text into what you're going to enter. There is such a mix-up between the Apple TV, the iPad, the Apple Watch, the iPhone, the Apple account, and the MacBook. And those are all things you can use to access Omnia's YouTube account, even if you do not know the password or even if you do not know the email. Those save the logins that people have done. And as soon as you start to even type one letter that you remember, it puts in the rest and is like, oh, are you trying to enter this in? Here, I've got this saved. And then it puts it in there and you're inside of everything they own as far as like a YouTube account is concerned. And they carry over between multiple pieces of hardware. You could make the account while you're on an iPhone, and the iPad and the MacBook could have that. And he even talks about that they used to use his MacBook to stream on Omnia's channel. Okay, so think about that. When you stream on YouTube, you have to log into the YouTube channel and you have to enter in the streaming ID number, whatever it is, depending on what software you're using, like OBS. That means on Kai's computer, they logged into Omnia's account multiple times to stream. Okay? That means at some point, Omnia entered in all of her account information on that iMac. I'm sorry, not iMac, iMac. We're back in the 1990s now with giant CRT tubes. MacBook. And then he took that back to his house. And that's one of the things he complains about, that she asked to buy a new one, and that before she couldn't have streamed anything that you're watching her stream anymore because they used to both use his MacBook to do that. That means that Omnia multiple times entered in their account information. That means you had more than enough time to save that, keep it on your computer, log in and change everything, delete the accounts, etc., etc. Like, maybe you are fooling some people who don't have YouTube accounts or don't have Apple hardware, but you're not fooling any of us who do. Like, we understand how easy it is to keep that information on there and log in without knowing any of the person's personal information to log on. So, like, that's not a good excuse at all. Then he goes into how he didn't isolate Omnia, how he never stopped them from seeing their parents, and he just uses like 2 or 3 different screens of SMS messages. And it's like, Kai, a couple of messages prove absolutely nothing. First of all, your messages can go between all the same hardware that I just talked about, because all of them are SMS messages across iPads, MacBooks, etc. And you can go in there and go back and delete messages and add new messages in. We saw this in the Arcadum case, where he did this over and over again with old messages between different platforms, especially those within SMS used between Apple computers. So that's not great evidence. I'm not saying you did go in and change them, but because you can do that makes it very shaky evidence. On top of it, a couple of screenshots of times that you were like really super nice to each other doesn't prove anything. Every relationship has its ups and downs. And if you only show people screenshots of when they were on their ups, then okay, great, you've shown the best part of it. But how many bad screenshots are you not showing us? Like, come on, none of us are this dumb to think like, oh wow, everything was perfect. Look at these 2 or 3 times they talked and they were so happy. Like, are you kidding me? Anyway, let's close in on a finish to this whole thing. I don't know how much more he's going to continue to post this. I'm really surprised he started a 3rd channel now to do this. This is what makes people distrust you, Kai. I'm going to go over it, okay? Your story keeps changing, all right? The things that were gifts, the things that you took or didn't take keeps changing. Your videos keep changing. They've changed multiple times now. You keep deleting videos too. You're taking stuff down. You're starting new videos, stating new stories that change your old stories. You have 5 arrests that are not settled yet. Your court cases aren't settled yet. You argue for like almost 80% of your videos arguing over petty items. Like when you have to argue over who owned how many Lysol wipes, you're getting very, very petty. And then finally, why don't you just wait until this whole court case is done? I don't think this would be anything a lawyer would advise, to keep going on here, keep making new channels, and keep trying to argue for what did and didn't happen, what you did or didn't take, who did or did not hit the other person. This cannot help at all for your court case. But let's just say your whole court case does finish. Why wouldn't you just wait for this whole court thing to go down before you ever came back to YouTube? The court can absolve you of all this, and then you can come back and say, well, here's the court's proof that I didn't do any of this stuff that I was accused of doing. And people might actually have to listen and not have to hear you tell a different story every 5 minutes. But let me guess, that's not going to happen. And actually, I'll bet when you do come and go to court, it's not going to play in your favor, because you don't have 5 arrests and all 5 of them are completely like made up and false. I could say like maybe one time, maybe 2 times, and I've seen it on both sides, where girls or guys have called the police on the other person just to get them in trouble for unverifiable reasons that later get dropped in court. But 5, dude, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do when it comes to your court date, and I don't see it going particularly good for you, especially if your stories are as mixed up as they are here on these videos. I don't know, guys. You can go and check it out. It's just called Kai. It's his new channel. You can barely tell it's his. It's a bunch of Ghibli art and another anime profile pic, so, it's almost like it's disappeared into the ether again, and I wonder how long it'll be before he takes this video down and replaces it with another. I hope I've mostly stuck to the right gender classification throughout some of this. I think I did slip up a couple times. I'm trying to get better. I think I only messed up a couple times on this one, but I do apologize for the times I did mess up. I want to thank all of you guys for helping me think of ways to get better at expressing gender and making sure I get it right. A lot of you guys had a lot of great input, so I really, really appreciate that. I always listen to you guys, and I always listen to when you correct anything that I get wrong, because that's something I always want to do. I want to be my own strictest critiquer of my own videos, because I guess I just don't want to end up like Kai, where I change my story every time and tell lies nonstop. Until next time, guys, I've been the Inksmith. I hope you have a great rest of the day.